Welcome to this edition of the Arklatex Crime Files. I'm Jonathan McCall. It has been 40 years since 4 people from a family were found dead inside of a home in Shreveport Cedar Grove neighborhood. The family, victims of Nathaniel Code, the man known as the Cedar Grove Killer. In 1990, Code was sentenced to death for the murders, but 35 years since the conviction, he still remains alive. For the families of those victims, they say justice has not been carried out. In this edition, I talk with retired Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Scott Crichton, who was the lead prosecutor in the case.
Justice, again, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We greatly appreciate it. Your uh, legal background in Louisiana spans a number of decades. You unfortunately had uh, were the lead prosecutor on the case involving Nathaniel Code many decades ago. Um, when you're working in the Caddo Parish DA's office at the time, just what goes on in the back of your mind when you receive this case? Obviously, I'm sure you had been following the story, but to then be intricately involved in this case, what do you remember about that time?
Well, I remember when the homicides took place, the 1984 homicide of Deborah Ford and the quadruple Vivian Cheney homicides in 85. I was aware of that because I was then a full-time assistant district attorney. The case was not assigned to me at first. At some point, he was arrested in 87 in connection with the William T. Code triple homicides, and it was assigned to the first assistant. He then got me involved in it at some point in 88, I think, or maybe early 1989. And then once it was set for trial in the spring of 1990, at least a scheduling order was done in the spring of 1990. He announced that he was going back into private practice. So, the DA somewhat surprisingly told me that I would be the lead counsel, the lead prosecutor on the case, and it was set later that September of 1990.
So you obviously you get prepared. The preparation is underway. Apologies. Uh, the preparation is underway for it. Obviously, there's a lot that you have to do to get ready for a case like this involving multiple scenes, multiple deaths. How long did it take? What was the process like in bringing this case to trial?
It was pretty much every day the first 8 months of 1990. Remember, there were, as you pointed out, there were 3 homicide scenes. Back then in 1985, I think the Shreveport Police Department had formed a task force of about 10 officers, perhaps more, and they worked night and day because the coroner, who was also not just a medical doctor but a forensic pathologist, had theorized that the guy would strike again, and he was right. He was right. Dr. McCormick was absolutely correct. And so it was, police reports probably certainly well into the hundreds, maybe 1,000 pages, uh, tons of photographs, videos, physical evidence collected at the Shreveport Police Department. So in 1990, in preparation for the trial, first of all, I picked another lawyer in the office to work with me, and she did a tremendous job. But we set up our working area in the old grand jury room in the courthouse, Caddo Courthouse, in the basement. It was a large room, a, a very long rectangular table in the middle of it, and we had all the evidence brought over there, and it pretty much lined the walls and took up all the space, pretty much. But we would interview witnesses there, police officers and expert witnesses and various people there in preparation. But months and months of work, night and day, to get ready for the trial, which was in September of 1990.
the trial gets underway. You have all of this evidence, all of these witnesses to go through in a trial in a case. Um, what does that I guess a case this large look like trying to present it to a jury, trying to get all of the evidence, all of the facts um, to, 12 men and women who are going to decide somebody's fate?
Well, it's a colossal feat, to try to organize this in a format where it can be, the story can be told to the jury of 12 persons. I mean, these are 12 people that know nothing necessarily about uh, forensic evidence. They know nothing about. They may have never served on a jury before. We were telling them at the time that it would be a 5 to 6 week sequestered jury case, which is a long time to ask a citizen to uh, step away from his or her private life and devote full time to a matter of the courthouse and be sequestered,
Hmm.
without communication with family members for that long. It turned out that we got the case done in 23 days, working really from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. with short breaks. But it was a feat to organize all of that because we presented all the evidence of all crime scenes, which included witnesses, family members of the victims, uh, you know, dozens of police officers, a number of expert witnesses on fingerprint identification and other matters. And it just took a long time. It took a long time to get it ready where it could be addressed in a logical, chronological fashion. And it took a long time and a lot of work to get the case presented day in and day out for more than 3 weeks.
Yeah. As you're preparing for this case, obviously we talked a little bit about the hundreds of pieces of evidence, the witness interviews, the testimony, all of that information. As you are getting ready for this, is there anything in particular that just sticks out to you at the time as the lead prosecutor on this case that is thinking this is possibly going to be different than anything I've ever done before?
Well, I knew going into it that it was something I'd never done before. I had prosecuted murder cases, armed robbery cases, rape cases, carjacking cases. I had never prosecuted a first degree murder case, never asked a jury to impose the death penalty, and I'd never had a case of this magnitude, nor had I ever had a case that was as horrific as this. The level of depravity, the level of evilness of this killer was just really unthinkable. But it actually happened. I mean, it was reality, but tough to imagine the level of evilness within. These were random uh, killings. They were brutal. They were designed to torture, uh, children and women in particular. He had a couple of male victims, two adult males, on the July 1985 homicide, Billy Joe Harris and Cheney-Culbert, I think. Uh, those two men were killed, but they were shot, and the two women, the adult woman in the house was horrifically tortured, brutalized, and her daughter even more so, nearly decapitated. So the level of horrific depravity is something I had difficulty with it. Working with that level of grotesque evidence day in and day out, trying to make some level of sense out of it was a challenge, and it was extremely sad. You don't just leave your emotional feelings outside the door when a prosecutor walks in to the courtroom. He or she brings with him all of his or her talent and skills, and but also emotions. And there were children brutalized and killed here in the triple in the three criminal murder scenes. There was one child in 1985 and two children in 1987 uh, that lost their lives in a brutal way, in a horrific way, and all of this is emotionally draining. But at the same time, as a prosecutor, I had to maintain my focus and uh, never show emotion. Although at one moment in time during the trial, I had a little bit of difficulty. But it is tough. It is tough. But keeping your eyes on the objective, which is to convince the jury of the guilt of this man beyond a reasonable doubt, and the fact that this defendant on trial, Nathaniel Code, is the worst of the worst, and has earned the death penalty. And if not, if he has not earned the death penalty, then who has? So, those are challenges for the prosecutors, and uh, I just kept my eyes on the outcome, seeking the outcome in this case, because I was convinced beyond any doubt, we had the right man. And of course, by the way, these killings stopped when he was arrested. The day he was arrested, never more, never was there another homicide in this area as that committed by Nathaniel Code on those three different crime scenes.
Yeah. As you're standing in the you touched on it as eloquently as anyone could. You're touching on the fact that you're in the courtroom with this convicted killer, or this accused killer, and um you're just feet away from him and you're prosecuting him. What goes on in the back of your mind as you're this close to someone that you know? You're standing, just feet away from him, prosecuting him. And as you said, the worst of the worst. How do you kind of quantify that in delivering your message to the jury?
Well, I kept my focus on presenting the case, a little bit less on his presence in the courtroom. In terms of the courtroom level of security, it was probably at the highest I'd ever seen. There were deputy sheriffs all around, and of course, Nathaniel Code then was clearly a stout, agile, tough man, and he was represented by a lawyer who was also a martial arts uh, teacher and someone who engaged in martial arts on a regular basis, looked away, strong guy too. Um, I really, uh, I walked behind him from time to time when I was demonstrating something to the jury,
Hmm.
and I was aware of the possibility, that he could do something crazy because I certainly knew his capabilities. But I again kept my focus on the end result, achieving the end result. That was my mission, and I didn't want to get distracted by such things as worrying about what he might do. I knew there was security in the courtroom, and if he did somehow quickly jump on me, I didn't think it would take very long for somebody to take care of him.
Yeah. Do you is there anything that obviously you got the outcome that you wanted, that you were seeking, um, in this decision. Is there anything about the case that you kind of Monday morning quarterback that you missed? I know that you said that you spent months laying this out and preparing and getting, everything aligned and making sure that you could tell that story in a sequential order. Is there anything that you felt that you wish you could have gone back and maybe done differently in the case, or is there an opportunity that you felt was missed?
You know, uh, I have thought over the years, and goodness, it's been, what, 35 years since I walked out of that courtroom following the jury death verdict. I've thought about it, but I really can't think of anything that I didn't do that I
Mhm.
should have done. I know that we provided, you know, the evidence. We disclosed all the evidence to the defense lawyer. That which, of course, is required by law, plus more. We were very transparent with opposing counsel, uh, and we maintained professionalism with regard to the defense counsel, and they maintained professionalism with us. We fought like warriors during the day, but at the end of the trial, I do remember the defense lawyer, holding, shaking my hand. Uh, his client had just gotten the death penalty, but he congratulated me, which seems odd, but that's the level of professionalism that the defense lawyer John Michael Lawrence had. He commended me for what he called a textbook example of a prosecution, and I deem that to be one of the most professional, one of the highest professional compliments ever that I've received. So, thinking back, I really, I wonder if I had to do it again. I'm not sure I could do it as well, quite frankly. I know
Wow.
that sounds a little bit odd too, but I was 36 at the time, and I was had prosecuted a lot of cases, not one that hard, but it it appealed to my, I guess, to my competitive spirit to some sense. Again, I was uh, so highly offended the uh, by the evil that this guy had done. I was so anxious to see justice achieved, and I just kept my eye on the ball. I kept my eye focused, my objective focused on getting the end result that I felt had to come. Of course, no jury. You never can predict a jury, they say, and certainly I could not predict this one. But I put everything I had into the case, and it was my last case prosecuting. There later that year, I was elected judge. One thing had nothing to do with the other. It just that the elections had come open and I signed up. But in any event, it was. I don't look back uh, uh, other than perhaps with some level of gratitude for the opportunity to handle a case of this magnitude. I think there's probably not any case in the history of Caddo Parish criminal matters like this one. This is by far uh, at the top of the list of horrific murder cases and evil defendants who have committed multiple murders. This man was a serial killer by definition.
Yeah. When you finished that case, obviously you talked a little bit about the emotional and mental aspect of it. Uh, when you're done and you can kind of sit back and you can think about it a little bit, was it mentally taxing for you to go through it? It was, obviously 23 days, but you mentioned just the evidence, the mountain of evidence, um the information, the pictures, the details. Um, once it's all over, do you take that big exhale and, you know, and understand kind of the magnitude, the gravity of what it is that you were a part of?
Yes, and it is, I suppose I suppose that while I was there, uh, my level of energy was up. I understood the magnitude and gravity of this case. I knew that I could not make any mistakes such that the case could be reversed
Mhm.
on appeal. I mean, I had to not only get a proper jury verdict, but I had to protect the record in terms of not doing anything from a prosecution standpoint that would imperil that would cause any sort of peril to the case. You don't want the case to be reversed and remanded for a new trial. That is not an acceptable outcome either. And that was on me. So yes, while engaged in that 23-day marathon uh, of a case, at the end, there is this almost I felt drained, exhausted because I was on 100% for so long, most of the year preparation plus the actual event itself. Um, and I had I'd only been married about 4 years and had two children by that point, young children, and I had to get reacquainted with them because I had spent so much time getting ready for this case. So there was a lot. There was a lot. There was a lot of relief when it was over, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to ask you two more questions, Justice, and then I'll ask you if there's anything that you specifically would like to talk about.
And by the way, I'm a retired.
Oh,
I'm a retired justice.
I
I
know,
don't want.
but just out of respect, I
I know, I know. I have to tell my friends to call me Scott, and most of them refuse to do it. But I'm back in the private sector now and enjoying that, and I don't want anybody in the public to think I'm using the honorific title of Supreme Court Justice. I'm retired and former judge of 34 years, but otherwise just a regular guy.
yeah. Um, Obviously, the families of the victims. I know it had to have been tough for them in still to this day, because yes, they were sitting through that trial with you. They were, in that with you. Uh, but right now, obviously, Mr. Code has not been put to death. He's still alive. Have you talked to the families of the victims?
I have,
Uh,
yes, I have, and Albert Culbert is the brother of Jerry Culbert, and he is the brother of Vivian Cheney. Those are two of the victims of the 1985 quadruple homicide. Albert was at trial every day in September and October of 1990, with the exception of one. I think on one day he had some scheduling conflict, but he was there every single day, all day, to my recollection. And through the years, Albert Colbert, who lives in Alexandria now, uh, uh, calls calls me every now and then with the same question, which is, Judge Crichton, what's taken so long? What's taken so long? So I have talked to him on a regular basis through the years, and his family, they want to see justice carried out. They don't understand why it has taken so long. What they want closure. They believe 100% in the death penalty for this man, and so you know they 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 stay on it. They've been in touch with the Attorney General. They've been in touch with District Attorney James Stewart, and Deborah Ford had two children, Sean and Nikki. Uh, two daughters. Fortunately, they were spending the night with their grandmother the night in 1984 that Nathaniel Code broke into her house and killed her. Had they been there, he would have killed them, no doubt. But they are now adults. I have not had any contact with them recently, but Albert Colbert, frequently. You know, the victims continue to suffer, and you know, Nikki Taylor, I'm sorry, Nikki Ford, and Sean are out there, and Albert Colbert and his family, they are out there. They are all grieving. They seek, you know, 40 years later, they seek justice, and they're entitled to it.
Yeah.
And I will say this: meanwhile, you know, and I do not cast fault on anybody, but and I will tell you that James Stewart, District Attorney James Stewart, has been advancing this case. It is stuck in this what is called in the law this collateral review, where this group of capital defense appellate defense lawyers who are paid by us, by the way. Uh, uh, they file all sorts of applications with district court, state district court, appellate courts, federal court, and it's been in that quagmire for most of the 35 years. It went up on direct appeal, and it was I think the case was rendered in 1993. I had to look at the date. The Supreme Court affirmed the conviction and sentence by unanimous vote back in 1993, and it has been on this bizarre odyssey called post-conviction relief or collateral review, and this group of lawyers whose mission I believe it to be to delay. And again, they're paid for by all of us, everybody in your viewing area. You and I pay for it as well, for them to do whatever they do. And they've been in excess of 30 years delaying this case, and been successful at it. Now, Paul Carmouche did not advance it during this phase like I would have liked. However, I was a judge at the time, and I had no contact with, and should not have had any contact with the case, and did not. Thereafter, Charles Scott was DA for 6 or 7 or 8 years, and now James Stewart. James Stewart has he has advanced it, and I have the highest regard for James Stewart in doing so, and so hopefully one day justice will be achieved for the families of the multiple victims.
Yeah. Anything you would like to add, sir, that I didn't ask you, but you think is important for the conversation?
Well, I think one other thing, I will tell you, the Shreveport Police Department during the years 84 through 87 and thereafter, in preparation for the trial, they worked so hard. I mentioned earlier that they had formed a task force working night and day. The Shreveport Police Office, the Shreveport Police Department, and again, about 10 or maybe even a dozen officers were engaged in this task force to catch this guy, and they did a tremendous job. Nathaniel Code was stealth. He was a proficient serial killer. It was challenging to assemble and marshal all the evidence, and ultimately apprehend him. But they did it, and those officers, I think, are all retired now. But I give them tremendous accolades for their hard work. I mean, they went well over, and I know this because I worked with them. They went over and beyond that which might have been ordinarily necessary to catch this guy. And once they did, Of course, as I said earlier, the killing stopped.
Yeah.
He was the serial killer. They had him, but it was not until 1987. And thereafter, between 87 and 1990, through 1990, they worked tirelessly with me. So the work didn't stop. The work continued to educate me in terms of the manner in which I would present this case to a jury. So I have nothing but the highest regard for them. I have nothing but the highest regard for the people in the neighborhood, and we're talking about uh, East 74th Street, East 72nd Street. I think it was West 66th Street. In that area, the people in the area, the neighbors, the good citizens in that area were very helpful. They provided as much information as they knew
Mhm.
to police, and I was out there on in that area a lot, checking out the proximity of the houses of murder and all of that. But they could not have been any nicer to me or more hospitable. They understood that this guy had to be caught. He was only he was only a Cedar Grove killer. He didn't go beyond he didn't go beyond 66th Street, nor did he go beyond 74th Street, as far as I know. He stayed in that general area. You know, I guess the central point would be East 70.
Yeah.
And so the good citizens in that area understood the gravity of this. They understood that anybody could be next. So it was a concerted effort by them to help the police, and then later to help me in marshaling the evidence for a jury and presenting the case. So really, I guess several groups: police, the good citizens in the neighborhood, uh, and of course, finally, again, let me remark on the victims. These victims were there with me, and they gave me full support. So that is, those are the elements which make for a good prosecution when the lawyer or lawyers assigned to the case have the full support of all of these groups working together. But we're all working to achieve the same result,
Yeah.
which is justice.
Yeah. Does the why ever stick with you after all of these years?
I'm
Is it a
sorry.
question that you ask yourself, the why?
Yes, I asked myself a question in 1990. I've asked myself that question whenever I've thought about the case. Uh, I'm not sure we'll ever know. Uh, I suppose that Nathaniel Code on death row could tell us. I suppose he could do that as to the why. But these were all, I think, emotionally charged killings. This is not a situation where a person is uh, raped and killed. It's not a situation where a person is necessarily armed robbed and killed. There was emotion and hate involved. These were torture killings for the most part. All of them were overkill, you know, except for the two men shot in the head, and then there was even overkill on one of them because but once he was shot a couple of times, and I'm not sure if that was Billy Joe Harris or Jerry Colbert, um, even though I believe he may have been dead, Code came back and stabbed him in the throat. So uh, on all of the women that were killed, it was absolute torture and brutality, emotionally charged, fueled by hate. The same was true with regard to the two boys, Eric, who was 8, and Joe Robinson, who was 12, who was staying with William T. Code on 66th Street in 1987. They were brutalized, not as badly as Carletha Culbert in 1984. But what obviously drove Nathaniel Code was hate-filled emotion, and that That is a disturbing element about all of this.
Yeah.
Our case, all of these killings were just, of course, any killing, any murder is grotesque. These were beyond grotesque, beyond anything I had ever seen before in my life. I hope I never see it again. And what drove him to do this, besides this extreme level of hate, is beyond me. I can't comprehend it. I don't think normal people can comprehend it.
Right now, it's unknown exactly when Code will get an execution date. His case is still going through the appeals process. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of the ArkLaTex Crime Files. I'm Jonathan McCall.